Hello and welcome to this video on how to protect your data. My name is Thomas and I am a senior technical consultant with BAASS. Today we will discuss how to keep IIS secure, how to keep SQL Server secure, authentication, things to think about when working from home, and what security looks like in the future. One of the most important steps is to remember that IIS is a part of Windows and all security is applied through Windows Update. So it is good practice to make sure that your server is always up to date on all the security updates. Use service accounts. We see this a lot where IIS might be running as an actual user account or a domain admin account. From a security standpoint, that is not a good practice. So set up service accounts and configure the access accordingly. Another big thing is security certificates. A security certificate will be implemented on the server and in IIS with a configured binding to keep all the traffic with that server encrypted. We want to disable old and insecure protocols like SSL and TLS 1.0, 1.1. A good tool to use if you don't want to manually edit the Windows registry on your server is to download IIS Crypto from Nartak software. Keeping these protocols on the server and active would be like installing a bank vault door to your house and still have open windows. You can implement all the security in the world. If you don't disable insecure protocols, you're still vulnerable to an attack. When it comes to SQL Server, again, using service accounts, this limit the access to SQL Server. We can set permissions to directories much stricter and greatly limit who can access the data from a file level or from the SQL Server level. Again, we want to patch our SQL Server. A great site to find the latest patches and keep up to date on that is sqlserverbuilds.blogspot.com. That will have every patch ever released for SQL Server, all versions. Another thing that should be mentioned is before applying any patches, whether that being a Windows update or a SQL patch, it's good practice to apply it in a test system before applying it to production to make sure that there's nothing in that patch that is breaking functionality. Another thing is that you can also reach out to BAASS and ask before applying a patch. But even if you get confirmation from us, you could have a customization in your system or software that we are not aware of, and testing it yourself is always good practice. Which brings us to properly configured backups. If we're applying patches to our SQL Server, obviously all of our backups must be in order. In case something goes wrong, we can roll back, but we see that more often than I would like to. We see customers with no SQL maintenance plans. This is something that we can help you out with. Reach out to your account manager. Once we've configured our backups and maintenance plans, it would be good to know whether or not they executed as expected. A good way of doing that is to configure database mail, which gives you the ability to have a notification sent out. You can have emails go out only on failures or on both failure and success. And there's more that can be done with this as well. We can set up SQL Server alert for things that happen in the database engine. Alert codes 19 to 25 and 825 are fatal errors in the database engine. As an example, 825 read retry required could be an indication of data corruption or a failing hard drive. And it would be great to get a notification from SQL Server that there's some problem. This brings us on to our authentication. Another step in protecting data access is to not have it openly exposed to the internet. For an example, we could have another website set up that takes us to our firewall where we have to log on with our domain credentials. That will also be encrypted with a certificate, just as logging on to your bank. We authenticate with the firewall, and then we will be able to access the internal sites like Sage CRM. We can also do that by utilizing VPN. That would require us to have a VPN client on our device that connects to the VPN network and logs on with our own credentials. This communication would also be encrypted. And now, even though you're working from home, your computer, it will be exactly as if you were in the office. You will have access to all the local resources, just as if you were in the office. One thing to point out there is that while it is possible to run applications like Sage 300 right off your own computer, it is not supported by Sage to run the application that way over the internet. Connection speeds are not fast enough, and there is a risk of data corruption. If you want to use a VPN solution and have people working with Sage 300 from home, you can also implement an RDS server in the office. The user will connect to the VPN, then connect to the RDS server, and execute Sage 300 locally in the office and not across the internet. If the internet connection goes down, as residential internet can be unpredictable, it is only the RDP session that drops, and any query or process that is running in Sage 300 is still executing on that RDS server. With both of these solutions, we can also implement multi-factor authentication, sometimes also referred to as two-factor authentication, but a multi-factor authentication could be more than two factors. So a factor would be something you know, like a username and password, something you have. Maybe you need to have a USB dongle attached to your laptop, or something you are. And we're seeing this with, for example, iPhones with Face ID. So those are some examples. It should be mentioned that multi-factor authentication is far from perfect. There are today about 40 plus ways to penetrate MFA. So it's not as secure as you would think, but it's still a lot better than only username and password. That brings us on to our new reality where everyone is working from home, and we have our home Wi-Fi routers that also needs to be secured. We have a few different protocols. This ties back to the IIS part of this video where we were talking about disabling protocols on the server. Same thing for your router. There are several different protocols to connect to Wi-Fi, and we need to make sure that we are using the most secure method. We need to use at least WPA2. It is also, there are vulnerabilities for WPA2. If you have the option to use WPA3, it's preferred. It's using a stronger encryption, but even WPA3 has design flaws and it's not perfect, but it's the best we have for now at the time of this recording. When we get our devices set up from our cable company or our internet services provider, they have it pre-set up with username and password. That could be something like admin, and it is important that we change our router passwords. We also want to change our Wi-Fi password, where this could be set up with the serial number on the device. This is a piece of hardware, and just like anything else, there are updates. Updating hardware is called firmware updates. Apply your security patches for your Wi-Fi router. We want to log into our Wi-Fi router, and there's usually a check for updates option. We want to disable remote access, and this is something that you would have to do in your advanced settings. If you don't know how to do any of these things, contact your ISP, and their support should be able to assist you. We want to disable universal plug and play. We want to disable WEP, disable WPA. As we're stated in the first point, we're going to want to use WPA 2 or 3. So we want to disable the older protocol, WPA. We want to disable a protocol called WPS. There are some good intentions with that protocol, and I'm sure that some viewers might be using it. What that does is that it's letting you connect a new device with a push of a button on the outside of your device. So that could be a printer. You push a button on your router, you push a button on your printer, they establish a handshake and sets up the connection automatically. However, this is vulnerable to a brute force attack. So if you don't specifically need it, disable it. Most home routers have an option for a guest network. In case you have people coming over that are guests to your house, they don't need to know what your actual Wi-Fi passwords are. You can use a guest network and limit access, lock out their devices from any of your own devices so that you are protected in your own Wi-Fi network. They still get internet access, but no access to devices on your network. Use a password manager. This is a good one. It doesn't really apply as much to your router per se, but it's just good practice in general. It applies to the fact that we are changing our router password and Wi-Fi passwords, and we need to set secure passwords. So what does a secure password look like? Password 123 is not a secure password. Passwords that are secure could be more than 12 characters long, maybe even more than 20, and include uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters. With a password manager, the only password you're going to have to remember is the password to access your password manager. An example of password manager that you might have heard of could be LastPass, Keeper, NordPass, KeePass, Dashlane. Some of these also offer a VPN solution. This would not necessarily be applicable to you in your professional life, but even for your personal life, it is a good idea to use a VPN. So people say a password like that, all of those special characters, I will never be able to remember, even if it's just the one password to access my password manager. What if I forget that password? If you forget that password, there is a problem because those companies, that software, don't usually allow a password reset for security reasons. So you can base it on something that you can easily remember, but still make it a secure password. One example of that could be to base it on something simple as a nursery rhyme. And I have an example here where we have taken Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. We're picking the first two letters, Humpty Dumpty, S at for sat, a 0 for on, a wall, period. There we have fulfilled our password requirement except for the length of the password. So we continue on, replacing the character H with a pound sign and carry on in the same manner. And after a couple of times typing in a password like this, it is fairly easy to set up a secure password. Don't use this one. The next and last thing is security questions. We see this a lot on websites and services these days where we have to put in my mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet, what school I went to, things like that. Never put the real answer to those questions. Anyone can Google which school you went to, what your mom's maiden name was, what is your middle name. These are things, while it seems like things that only you know, they are truly not. Also, in the day of Facebook and scams, people answer these tests and posts all the time. For example, I bet you don't remember your first phone number. I bet you don't remember your first teacher's name. All of these seemingly harmless questions are actually disguised ways of getting your answers to security questions. What is your favorite food? Name a pet that is no longer with you. So on and so forth. You answer to feel like you are participating, you're getting something out of it, but they are getting the answer to your security questions. In your password manager, you will have an option to generate a random character string and use that as your answer to the security question. It is not convenient, but as the saying goes, if it's convenient, it's not secure. So here's an example of a password list. And if I would do this, what is your mother's maiden name? I use this, answer the password question, stick it in my password manager, and say, this is Amazon, as an example, and security question for mother's maiden name. What is my first pet? Amazon security question for first pet. And yes, like I said, it's a little bit inconvenient, but no one will ever guess those answers. So what does it look like in the future? Well, we talked a little bit about TLS and using TLS 1.2, disabling old protocols. TLS 1.3 is available in Server 2022 and Windows 11. It's actually been around for a few years, but this is the first version of Windows where it's being implemented. As of right now, I don't think there are any plans of making it backwards compatible for older Windows versions. Microsoft might change that in the future. Also, remember that you are your biggest vulnerability. It's not malicious intent, but by not keeping your systems up to date, you are vulnerable. By not having your users aware of the risks that are out there makes you vulnerable. A good example would be a phishing email where someone sends off an email with a link, click on the link, fill out the info. The site looks like the site, but it's not. You give away some security information and the attack has started. They might not be getting to your data right that second, but it's just a matter of time. By educating your employees, they might be more aware and think twice before clicking on links, answering a phone call, giving away a certain piece of information that could be critical to these people that are trying to access your data, encrypt your data, ransomware, all of these things. And the more information you have, the more knowledge you have, the more secure you are going to be. Companies spend millions of dollars on firewall, encryption, secure access devices, and all of this money is wasted because none of these measures address the weakest link in the security chain, which is the user. You are the biggest vulnerability. I hope you got something out of this session. For more information, contact Zainab Salihi. She is the CRM practice lead here at BAASS. And if required, she can assist in connecting you with Lanetco, which is our sister company for providing IT services. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.